Welcome to the Silicon Slopes Conversations. Today we're here with Zeb Evans, who's the founder and CEO of ClickUp, and a well-dressed gentleman. How are you?
Doing great. How are you guys?
We are good. It's a full house. Congrats. A lot of ClickUp folks in the audience, which is always good. Way to support. Let's just jump right in for those that don't know. ClickUp, the founding story.
Yeah, so I think it starts, a long time ago, but really the elements of it coming to fruition were about 4.5 years ago, where we were working on something completely different than ClickUp. We wanted to build a Craigslist competitor where you could pay in-app and remove sketchiness from Craigslist. At the time, Craigslist was the largest source of fraud internally in the United States. So excluding credit card fraud, it was the largest source of fraud. And I had been an entrepreneur since I was like 4 or 5 years old. So I was always like buying and selling things on Craigslist and eBay. And I'd gotten scammed many times. And so that was the problem that we set out to solve. But before we did that, we wanted to build our own productivity tool where we could put all of our work in one place. And that frustration came from my previous startup, which was like social media marketing and automation and reporting before that stuff kind of existed. I started with Basecamp, and it was just myself. And then we ended up with like 30 people, and we literally used 15 different productivity tools. We still had Basecamp, but we used Jira for engineering. We had Asana for lists. We had Trello for boards. At the time, you couldn't switch between them. We had marketing approval software. We had Google Docs. We had Google Sheets. We had Skype and Slack. We had Todoist for personal reminders. And then we had Confluence. And the whole goal of productivity is to make you more productive, right? They're called productivity applications, but I couldn't help but think that we were being less productive by using them. And so I kind of just like snapped and was like, let's just create our own tool before we create the Craigslist thing so that we'd be able to do it more efficiently and more productively.
Yeah, you and I are in the same boat with productivity tools. They seemed less productive the more you have. And we face that problem here. And we've been pitched by Howard and others that we need to start using ClickUp. And the more I hear about it, the more I like. So you're solving your own problem, building your own startup, and a little bit similar to Slack, right? That evolved from a problem as well. So at what point did you push all of those aside and start using ClickUp?
Very, very quickly, actually. Too early probably is the answer, where it wasn't ready for what we needed it to be. But very quickly, I mean, and also I think the point to make is that we started ClickUp, and I thought it would take us like a month to finish, naively. And we got a month or so into it, and that was where the switch flipped, where we really just realized that this is what we wanted to create and productize. I'm extremely passionate about productivity and efficiency, and every minute mattering. And everybody that was the founding core folks were as well. So we knew very quickly that this was the thing that we wanted to sell. It didn't take us years to realize that.
Very cool. And you're a big proponent of productivity because you've had some incidents in your life, some near brushes with death. How did that impact you, and why do you have this philosophy of productivity?
Yeah, so I've had 4 near-death experiences, 5 if you count one from like a month and a half ago. I was in a car accident, and the car was totaled, and we hit 2 trees. But I feel like I have 9 lives, but I also feel like I have this extreme focus on where do you spend every minute, right? And how do you spend every minute? What are you doing to make that minute productive? And if it's not, then you need to change something. And so, I mean, there's tons of tools and tricks and methodologies and everything out there. And I think largely everybody is different, and every company is different. No one size fits all. But that's why we built ClickUp so flexible and customizable. It's honestly, it's the good and the bad of ClickUp, is that we don't have an opinion in how you work. So you can flex it and mold it to whatever you want to build. But at the same time, you have to do that, right? You kind of have to build it yourself. And so I think those near-death experiences contributed how much I care about productivity, how much I care about efficiency, and certainly if I hadn't had them, ClickUp would not exist.
Yeah. So if 5 near-death experiences, you have 4 lives left. I hope you have a good insurance policy, life insurance, and all
yeah. I think
that.
our head of legal is somewhere here, Howard.
Yeah, nobody wants that. Okay, so with your philosophy on productivity, you got like a 1% kind of rule, and what is that?
So it's for the whole company. We say grow 1% every day, and the philosophy is more around progress towards perfection. and knowing that iteration is better than perfection, generally speaking. When we were early on in a startup, I always said progress over perfection. Like, don't even think about perfection, just think about progress. Then you have to make a shift at a certain point that you need to start thinking about perfection and march towards that, but still over focus on the progress towards getting there. And so I think that's what productivity is about. It's about just making progress. And it doesn't have to be fully towards the end goal that you want it to be, because many times you create the longest, maybe best plan that you could ever create for building something. It doesn't have to just be product or for some type of strategy. And you march all the way towards that direction. You spend 100% of your time doing it, and then you realize that it was the wrong direction, or then you realize you should have done something differently. If you just go 10% or even 1% more, you're going to learn much quicker, and you can be reactive to changes. So you can be reactive to what markets are telling you, you can be reactive to what customers or employees are telling you, and you can change your direction and change your path. So I think that's at the core of productivity. It's growth. It's just all about growth. And I think that's what growth is equivalent to happiness in many ways too, not just in work, but in your personal lives. And if without growth, I mean, it's like, why are we here? What are we doing if we're not building, if we're not growing? And I think that's also, it's what makes you feel productive. Like, it's hard to measure productivity, and we're trying to do it. But at the same time, it's all about how do you feel? Like, do you feel like you're growing? And for me, I certainly get that from work, but outside of work, it's as simple as just setting 10 minutes a day aside for growth, whether it be listening to a podcast or reading 10 minutes of a book. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. And usually that 10 minutes turns into longer. But the point about 10 minutes is that anybody can make 10 minutes. No matter how busy you are, you can always make 10 minutes. And that's where it starts.
Yeah, so associating productivity with happiness, you're the founder of ClickUp, but you're also a person with your own feelings and emotions. Feeling productive and happy for you personally, how do you know you're in a good spot?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about being honest with yourself and knowing that it's okay to be stressed out or to feel like there's tons of problems that you can't solve. Like that's okay. So you have to acknowledge yourself, your feelings and where you are. I mean, it's founding a company. It's not easy, right? It's probably the hardest thing you can do as far as work goes. You're going to be hit with trucks every single day, hit with major problems every single day. You're going to be worried every single day about, is your business going to survive? Is this even the right path that I'm on? But I think the progress towards perfection thing matters more than anything in that scenario. Is like, just show that you're making progress, and it helps. But I think everybody talks about their own like methodologies in the mornings and the evening. I think everybody's different. But for me, I'm a huge journaler, and I love baths, and so I take a bath as soon as I wake up and right when I'm going to sleep, and that's like my way to disconnect and to write and to really realize how I'm feeling. And you just have to be honest and open, and disconnect sometimes, or do the things that you love doing and enjoy doing when you're starting to feel stressed out. Right? For me, I love product. Right? I'm very much the product marketing founder, and so when I'm getting too many meetings or too much kind of problematic things that you're dealing with, then I like to disconnect from those. And it doesn't mean I'm disconnecting from work, but I'm doing the work that I love and enjoy doing, and it's what kind of re-inspires you.
Very cool. So productivity in a company, in a business, if the majority of the workforce is productive, they'll probably be happier at work, and then when they go home, it's a bad feeling when you're leaving the office and you're like, dang it, wasn't a good day, right? And you mentioned you're a product kind of founder. How do you guys as a company kind of measure the productivity internally, and then how rewarding is it to see your clients being more productive and ultimately more happy?
I think right now productivity is largely measured qualitatively, and I think that's a good way to measure it. It's like, what objectively did you get done this week, this day? What are the things, the milestones that you're tracking towards, the goals that you have, that progress, celebrating that progress. And so largely productivity as a whole is measured that way. What we're trying to do is also measure it quantitatively, and it's not easy, and it certainly isn't perfect yet. But we know that if we can put all of your work in the same place, and we know where your communication is happening, we know where you're bottlenecked, we know what you're tracking towards and what your strategy should be, if you can tell us your goals, then over time we can give you a quantitative measure of productivity. It's more relative. It's like what did you get done this week versus last week, or this month versus last month, or this quarter versus last quarter, because no two companies, no two teams are the same. So you really have to measure against like what was done prior in the past to know if you're becoming more productive over time.
And then if you get that 1%, it compounds and becomes better. Very cool. So you guys are kind of riding a rocket ship. Hyper growth, you've raised a lot of money in a short amount of period, and from some big funds, right? That are intimidating, I would imagine. They're kind of the who's who. How are you and your team managing this hyper growth?
Yeah, I think it's certainly challenging. We went from 100 to 850 employees in about a year, and so everything that can break down during that period did. But growth is just equivalent to how fast you can react to and solve problems. Like that's what growth is. Can you admit there's a problem, find it, figure out some solution, try to fix it, and then move on to the next problem. It's all problems. So you just have to enjoy solving problems, and that's what that mindset is. Like that, I think that was the experience that I learned was you keep getting hit with more problems, and people problems are tough, right? They get to you emotionally, but that's the reality of the choice that we made, and you can create a lot of growth from solving problems. So for us, like that is what still motivates us, and ultimately that's how we were able to grow that fast. But I think it's also important to bring in people from the outside that have seen what it looks like on the other side, right? Bring people from all different size companies, people that have seen what it looks like at 50,000, at 5,000, at 500, at 5. Having all of those perspectives is very, very, very important, and putting those people in the same room or the same Zoom meeting and discussing those problems, because you can leapfrog yourself and solve them a lot faster than you would on your own.
Yeah, and speaking of on your own, the buck stops with you, right? CEO. With the hyper growth, I imagine a lot of these are just brand new experiences. Looking around the corner like, oh, that's going to be a new one. Kind of skiing blindfolded occasionally. You mentioned kind of using others as case studies, board, that type of thing. When you don't quite know the vision or the answer to the next phase of growth, what are some tools or methods you use to get a better understanding?
I like just trying things. I think you'll learn by doing. There is no textbook you can read. There's no single perspective you can go to, and they can give you what they did in the past. But it's just different. Every context, every company, every person, every product, it's all very different. So nothing works the exact same way that it did at any given point. So again, I think it's just about being reactive. Like it's like trying things and not going too far in that direction. Like saying this is what we think the solution is. Let's try it a little bit and see if it's working and starting to work. Double down, triple down on it. If not, pull back and go in the other direction. That's what we've always done, and I think it's the best way to learn. I also think it's the most fun. I think it's more fun that way, and there's certainly more growth that comes from it.
So if you're going down the wrong track, you won't go very far, and you minimize your waste of time and loss. That's a very good approach to doing that. So for example, you guys needed to make a decision on when to raise funds. What was the thought process there? How did the team come to the decision that it was the right time?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of serendipitous, but I think a point to understand is, so we didn't raise funds early on. We were very much bootstrapped until, actually we were extremely profitable a year and a half ago. And we thought that, I mean, I'm from North Carolina, from a small town in North Carolina, and I was always very wary of bringing on Silicon Valley investors, right? You see the, Steve Jobs experiences, those types of things, and you incorrectly assume that all investors are like that, and they're not. But we didn't have a choice, because not only did I not know how to fundraise, but our vision was like building everything for everyone. We didn't want to choose a segment. We wanted to build very flexible software, and basically 15 products inside of one. And at the time, I mean, it still is to some extent, do one thing and do it well is the general consensus. So nobody would fund the idea that we had. Even after we became profitable, nobody would fund it. I went up to San Francisco And for a week, I did the fundraising thing because the investors are calling you and they're begging you to come. I'm like, okay, this is going to be easy. Every investor's calling us. We'll go up there. And I did the dance and talked around to every investor, and only one investor told us no. Every other investor didn't say yes. So that's what I don't think investors really say no. They always just because they don't want to pass on the business and then be wrong, and they don't want like the reputation of being wrong. But if they don't give you an immediate yes, it is a no. Like that's how investors work. And with the no was actually from Andreessen Horowitz, and they wrote me like a 2-page long letter, and it was very, very thoughtful. And so every investor that didn't say yes to us, I completely ignored for until now, and I always will. I definitely hold their grudges, but it probably too hard. But I think that it's also just important to understand who gives you credit, right? Who believes in you from the beginning, and so that's why we took Andreessen Horowitz on our Series C, is because they did it very gracefully. They did tell us no, and they told us why, and they said they may be wrong, and then they said, hey, they were wrong, and they reached out and they did it very, very gracefully. But there's I think the story about when we actually did and so raise our Series A, which was probably like 7 or 8 months later after we tried to raise. So after we tried to raise, I felt like I stayed there another week, and it was like 2 weeks of completely wasted time. And obviously I'm the productivity person. I thought it was the biggest waste of time I had ever done in recent memory. And so that summer, I think it was like May, David Sachs reached out to me, and we just ignored every single investor. But he reached out himself, and I knew who he was, and I respected him. And so I returned his phone call, and we talked, and what was a 30-minute meeting turned into like 3 hours. And we just kind of clicked. It was the first investor that I really clicked with, and I felt like was a real person that understood the struggles of being a founder and wasn't just really in it for themselves. So it's very rare to find those investors. Like it really is, and the ones that are going to be on your side when things are tough. And he always has been. So I think somebody told me early on, like, choose the investors that you would marry. Right? And I think it's very true. Like you're the only thing that you should care about aside from the obvious things like your term sheets, the only thing you should care about is culture. Is your investors a culture fit for you? Like that's what you should be screening for, because investors are actually not going to help you grow your business. They don't. They're running their own company. They have their own things to think about. They can't jump into your company and understand everything that's going on and tell you what to do. They can point out problems on your financial projections and your balance sheets, but they're not going to be able to help grow your business. Like you have to do that, and regardless of which investors they are, even if they're the Sequoias of the world, that's always going to be true.
Yeah, that's very good advice, and it's okay to hold a grudge every once in a while. You've mentioned product time and time again. I'm always interested when I'm using software as a product. I wonder who thought of this and how ended it up on my computer and I'm using it. How do you guys run your product life cycle? You're obviously going to be passionate about it, but how does the stuff that we use originate? What's the thought process within ClickUp?
Well, so it's very much a different story today than it was a year ago. Really, a year and a half ago, I was actually the only product and design person at the company. So I love product, and we were very much. We didn't do things the way that you would normally do. We didn't have user research. We didn't really have any type of testing framework or validation. We just kind of sat in a room with some when we were able to hire designers. I would sit in the room with another designer or two, and then we would think about how first of all, we'd listen to feedback, which is the most important thing that you can do. It's like use a feedback platform if you're building a product. We use Canny. It's great, but there's plenty of them out there. And if you are the founder, or if you are the product person, product co-founder, or even just head of product, like that's what you should be in all day, is listening to every single piece of feedback that comes in. You can't act on every piece of feedback, but you at least can synthesize like the trends that are coming from it, and it can help you build your product in a way that increases organic and viral growth. Because if you build what customers are asking, then you take it to the next level, like that's how you're going to grow more organically. So, I mean, inside of ClickUp today, now we have 15 or so different product squads that are each focused on a functional area of the product. So for example, there's a docs squad that's focused just on docs, and there's an engineering manager, there's a product manager, there's several engineers, and there's usually an engineering lead. And they're all marching toward the same direction as far as what they're building within that piece of the product. So it's more of a formalized, it's more of a structure now. You've got to mature as you grow, but you can't add too much process. And that's, I think, where you go wrong in product, is adding way too much process. And you just have to hire incredible product people that love and enjoy what they're doing, and give them the freedom to create.
And it sounds like that's your favorite part of being the CEO. What's your least favorite part?
I would say meetings. I think meetings in general can be very inefficient. So all of our meetings are I would say most of them, I hope, there's a lot of our employees here, I think most of them should be very productive. We have a rule that should be followed most of the time, of 30-minute meetings max, so no hour-long meetings, condense them into 30, and do meetings with a goal and the right stakeholders, because meetings can become highly inefficient. Your calendar can be blocked down by meetings, and everybody, especially when you're remote, like lots of times when meetings aren't engaging, you're just browsing anyway. You're answering your Slack messages. You're on ClickUp, like whatever you're using. You're just doing that behind the scenes. So you might as well not be on the meeting. So I think meetings can be frustrating and inefficient.
Yeah, I would agree. And there's also some fun parts of being a startup that's on hypergrowth. One of those is a funny, really well done Super Bowl commercial. Talk a little bit about that. Who came up with the idea, and what was the process like to do that?
Yeah, so we've always been a very creative company, and I live and breathe it. And so I hired our first real creative hire, our chief creative officer, Melissa. She was very much consumer brand from BuzzFeed and Cheddar, and I hired her about a year and a half ago, a year and some change ago. And the premise was like, let's build all of our creative in-house. So almost all software companies use agencies for creative. For product, it varies. Lots of times you do product designers in-house, but for brand design, and especially video and animations, that stuff is usually done with other companies, with agencies. And so I just want to be able to do it in-house. I think if you do it in-house, you have more control over it, but it's also better. You have more ownership, because people actually care about what they're building. They have all of the context from the past. They're not just helicoptering into your company and trying to figure out a creative that works for you. Like, they are part of your company and your culture and your brand, and they're all in on it, and so they can build incredible creative. And so it doesn't work for everybody. It didn't work for us when we didn't have any money to hire those people. So don't get me wrong, everybody can't just do it overnight. But I think when you can, it does pay back itself. It's hard to attribute a lot of the revenue to creative, especially when it's organic. It's very hard. So when you look from a financial perspective, like, I think lots of times you're not going to get a green light from financial, because it just doesn't make financial sense. But it does in the long term. And so to answer your question about the Super Bowl commercial, I mean, that was one of those really big bets that we took on the organic and the creative side. We're like, we built this amazing creative department. Why can't we go out there and do like the top of the line thing, which is the Super Bowl ad, right? That's the creator's dream. A video producer's dream is to do a Super Bowl ad. And so we knew that we could. We knew that we had the team for it, and we did 100% of the Super Bowl commercial in-house. And we were the only software company to ever do that. And it was a great process. It was a big bet. We actually sat in a room, and 12 of our leaders voted on whether or not we would do this. We kind of did it out, and it was 6 versus 6. And then our CTO was like, "Wait, if my vote changes, then I'm going to change my vote from no to yes." And then so he changed his vote, and it was a yes. And I think it's as far as like attribution goes, it's hard to attribute. There's no way in hell, even for consumer brands, that you're going to get that lift of what you put into it overnight, right? Immediately when you get the traffic, it's not going to be paid back in ROI immediately, but through brand awareness and digital campaigns that you can complement it, and organic growth in the regions that you run it in. We ran it in 18 regions. That's where you can get the value back from. And so it's certainly still a bet. The creative itself was actually a theme of one that we had created already for the Declaration of Independence, that that went kind of viral just through software a little bit. And so we just kind of doubled down on that approach. We actually tested an entirely different, a B version also, that was like a before and after in the office versus ClickUp. And we used user testing, which is usually for product testing, but we put the video in there, and we got a lot of good qualitative feedback, and ultimately we took the bet on the Declaration one.
Very cool. And for those that haven't seen it, it's the Founding Fathers signing the Declaration of Independence, and I think it was John Adams couldn't find the latest draft. And there's papers all over the place, and Thomas Jefferson's making fun of him, and they're all making fun of him, and then somebody opens a computer, and I'm like, oh, I got it all here, and it's ClickUp, right? So it's really funny. And it's probably true that it was stressy for them to keep track of everything.
Yeah, it was true. They used ClickUp.
So you have a much more valuable company, which is time travel.
Yeah.
Good for you. T-shirt, company, time travel, and ClickUp. All right, we're going to open up for questions here in a little minute. I've got one or two more. You're a forward-thinking individual, and the pandemic's been interesting for remote work, and obviously ClickUp was in a good spot, good timing for that. I'm sure it saved a lot of people a lot of heartburn and ultimately made them more productive and happy. What's the two-sided question? What are you most excited about over the next year for ClickUp? And kind of the future of work as it pertains to your guys' product?
I think actually the answer is the same for both. We're working on the third version of our product right now, which is like the real final evolution of the original vision that we had since day one of being able to put all of your work in one place and being able to make you more productive. So we've built like this toolbox of tools, 15 tools really that are highly flexible and customizable. But the whole theme and the mission of saving you time is really only there if you're using it in the way that you're actually doing that. So the next evolution of ClickUp is bringing your communication in the same place. It's also managing people, and I think that there's a huge opportunity here to build an ecosystem of tools that don't exist today for managing yourself and managing people, knowing what everyone is working on, what should they work on next, and what can we get done over a given period of time. There's also, I think that Slack is it's a great product, but I believe it's synchronous. Everybody says it's asynchronous, meaning that you just kind of you answer messages when you want to. But I think the reality of Slack is like it's very much synchronous. Like when you're connected to a channel, it's live and your focus is entirely there. It's almost like you're on a Zoom call. And it's actually more distracting. You're going through and you're clicking through channels and you're marking things on red and you're going back and forth. So I think it's actually a huge source of inefficiency is like synchronous chat communication. So we're building something that's more asynchronous led, and that ties all of our other pieces of our platform together to truly make you more productive. And so I think that is more the future of work. As far as like remote versus hybrid goes, we were always about 50% remote in our company, even before the pandemic. So we were very supportive of a remote work environment. I think everybody works differently, and it's just important to embrace how people work. Some people work better remotely, some people work better in person, and largely it's dependent on the role too. We find our creative teams, they always work in person. Sales teams like to work in person. Whereas, and you'd probably guess most engineers don't like working in person. So it's just about I think that's another thing about like just try things, see what works, and then be reactive to what works.
Yeah. All right. We'll open it up to some questions from the audience. We should have some microphones right over there.
So I was creeping on your LinkedIn, and I saw that you said college is a waste of time. So I was just curious, if college is a waste of time, what is not a waste of time if you want to be a successful entrepreneur?
I gotta qualify that. It's like in general, college is a waste of time unless you're doing a highly specialized degree, and it's not everywhere. I think it's for me. I went to college for 2 years. I went to Virginia Tech, and then I dropped out after one of my near-death experiences. And I think for business, you do learn by doing, and especially in this day and age. I mean, you can just start things very quickly. Especially if there's no brick and mortar to it. So it's really important to learn by doing. If I hadn't done 3 or 4 of those different like attempts at a product before ClickUp, ClickUp wouldn't exist, or we would have made too many mistakes, and we just would have failed. So I think learning by doing is the way to learn. But there are always exceptions to the things, right? There are those top 1% of schools where you do learn a lot by doing, or you learn from professors that have done it before rather than from professors that are teaching you from a textbook and never actually experience it in real life. And so there's exceptions to everything for sure. And if you're going for a specialized degree where it really does matter, then you need it. But I think also my perspective is that it's still highly inefficient. Like I think college and for 4 years could be trimmed down to 2, and it would be much more efficient, much cheaper, and I think you would learn a lot more. But I also think you should learn what you want to do. I think high school should be where you learn what you want to do, where you learn all of the basics that you need, the math and all of the standard things you need through middle school, maybe first year of high school. But at least 2 years in high school you're just trying a bunch of electives. You're like saying like, do I like engineering? Do I like business? Do I like marketing? You're trying a bunch of things. And then when you go to college, you actually know what path you want to take. If you want to go to college, you know what path you want to take. And so you can go there and double down on it rather than going there and it being like a testing environment for if you like it or not. Because so many people go to college for a degree that they don't use today. And so I think it can be a waste of time.
Right there in the back.
Now, in retrospect that you've gotten your funding, what do you feel was the best use of those funds? What generated ROI, and what would you change? What didn't generate ROI for you?
Yeah, I think usually when you raise like your first round of funding, it's more for product. And also I'll take a step back when doing a startup, at the beginning the only thing that matters is product. Right? The only thing that matters is product. After product, the only thing that matters is product market fit. Got to have a sustainable product, people that want to use it, and people that will pay for it. Right? You have to have a business model to make it sustainable. And then after that, it's about people. Right? It's all about the people that you hire and the people that you bring into the company. So it's different for every funding stage that you're in, but like more of a Series A seed style, it's certainly just about the people. You've got to use the money, all of the money, for the people and the product. If you don't have the product there already. So it depends on what stage you're in. If you don't have the product, then sure, you got to spend it all on the product. Don't spend any on marketing. If you have the product and no product market fit, you shouldn't be spending any of it. You should be figuring out product market fit. Right? You shouldn't be marketing something that doesn't have product market fit. If you have product market fit, then you should be spending it on people and marketing, but you have to be sustainable when it comes to marketing. So I think everybody thinks you raise a shit ton of money from the outside, and this does happen. Don't get me wrong. Tech companies that raise a shit ton of money and they spend it really, really quickly, and it seems highly inefficient from the outside. Those companies having billboards and things like that. And I think that there actually is a measure to unit economics where the most important unit economic to understand is net retention. And I did not understand this until we started raising funds. And net retention is basically just every dollar that comes in, what is that dollar worth a year after it comes in? And if it's above 100%, it means that every dollar of revenue that comes in grows by over that dollar, including churn. Right, in perpetuity. So we have 160% net retention. So it means every dollar that comes in grows by 1.6x every year in perpetuity, including churn. And so what that allows us to do is we can spend a lot of money up front to acquire a customer, knowing that they'll pay us back over time. But you have to have your data there. You got to have your foundation there, because we did spend very inefficiently early on, and we wasted a lot of money early on. But we realized it, and then you have to fine tune it and make it more efficient. But when you're in a highly competitive category too, it is a land grab. I mean, it is a land grab, and when you have high net retention, it's a land grab. And so you've got to spend more money up front in order to get you to pay back over time, and that's all raising funds is. You could raise a very small amount of money and build the same thing, but it would just take longer. So raising funding is just about growing faster, and you have to always keep in mind like a sustainable and efficient approach to growing, even if you're inefficient at a certain point.
There in the back.
Hi, in one of your earlier campaigns, you targeted Atlassian Jira directly. And the content was really good and focused. Was that from personal experience of using Jira?
Was that like the Fire Jira ad or the Abeta tool ad, or just in general?
Just general.
I hated Jira. I mean, look, Jira's gotten better for sure, but I absolutely hated Jira when we started using it, and I was the administrator, and I felt like it just took 50 clicks to do anything that you wanted to do, and that it was so inefficient. Gets back to the inefficient thing, but it was the only option for software, for building software. It was all engineering, and everything else was too limited and too simple to use. So we wanted to build something that have all of the bells and whistles and the complexity and the surface area that Jira covers, but also build something that can be simple and be used by end users that just enjoy great product experiences, that we're using something simple for a small person team. So to answer your question, yeah, it was definitely from my frustrations.
Yeah, two-part question here, Zeb. Sia is my name. You are looking to open an office in Sydney, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. So this works for my APAC team. I work for a Series A company out of New Zealand, and they themselves are looking for growth in the US, right? And we also, our Series A was led by Inside Partners, so it can relate to that need to grow fast, right? So my two-part question for you is both internal and the obvious question for the room. Why Utah for your second office outside of San Diego? So speak to that. And also, what expectations can we have graduating from that Series A growth to whatever's next as a productivity suite ourselves? In no way competition with ClickUp, who are in the legal ops space. But what are some of those growing pains that can be expected, and how do you account for those as a product-led organization?
Yeah, so the first part about Utah is we looked at all of, like, I think the standard options that you would look at, the Austins and Atlantas of the world. That point I was just making earlier about the people at a certain point matter more than anything. So we were not in search of, like, where is the highest tech influence place to grow. We were in search of where are the best people that we can build the company with. And so we looked around, and we did the dance, and we came to Utah, and we started talking to all the leaders. At a certain point also, by the way, you can only spend your time in certain areas, and so at our scale, you have to spend your time hiring leadership. And so we were really just vetting all of the leaders in certain areas. And when we got to Utah, there was honestly a lot of just incredible, exceptional people here that were super excited and passionate about building something, which is not. It's not easy to find anymore, right? The job markets are really crazy. There's high demand in tech, and there's a lot of, like, cushy companies, and there's a lot of peacetime companies, right? We are 100% in wartime, and so we need to find people that are okay with being in wartime right now, and really just dedicating themselves and to the company and the mission, and building something that's their big hit. That this is something that we celebrate for the rest of our lives. It's a thing that stays here when we're gone. And here was where we were able to find those people. And so it's been exactly what we thought it was going to be, and better for sure. And the second part of your question is more around, like, after your Series A stage, what pitfalls to avoid?
Well, not only what pitfalls to avoid, but best practices for that fast growth, as you're starting to attract a lot more competition with what your approach has been, and also kind of what you alluded to, growing your leadership, training from within, and getting a lot of them ready for that next step.
Yeah, most things all revolve around product at a certain point. And so you've got to move really quickly when it comes to product, and just iterate as fast as you can. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't write perfect code. Don't write perfect tests. At some point, you can fix it. Everybody does. We're going through that process now. But as one of our head of data, head of analytics, he was like, Zeb, we wrote the perfect code in my previous company, and we had the perfect architecture and the perfect teams from the outside, but we grew at 10% a year. So you don't want to search for that point I was making originally. You don't want to search for perfection. You just want to search for progress. So I think that theme is what to double down on after your Series A. Also, don't become complacent just because you raise a Series A. In fact, it should light more fire under you to move faster, to break things, to go even more quickly towards that path that you have towards your vision. People are gonna. At that same time, the point about people is if you make wrong choices at Series A about people, you're screwed. And it's hard to undo. It's really, really, really hard to undo. So you always need to hire for what is your culture. You got to figure out what your culture is, first of all. I don't think lots of companies haven't actually figured that out. It's just a bunch of things that they put on a wall, a bunch of words they put on a wall. Figure out what your culture is. Make sure that you hire the leadership and the people early on that are in line with your culture. It doesn't matter about their accolades. And previous companies you can get very biased on, right? You can look at like this person is the head of marketing at Slack. Like, wouldn't this be an amazing hire for us? In reality, lots of people were there during the journey, and it's hard to find which person or small group of people were the real contributors to the success of that certain area. Very, very hard to do unless you have investors that are giving you that insight, which is I think the most valuable thing about investors is back channeling. They will be able to tell you, you can send them any candidate, and usually they'll be able to find out a lot of information from inside of the company about those candidates. And that is the single best way to hire and to avoid problems. We have avoided so many problems by back channeling. And if you don't have investors, or if your investors can't help you, you can reach out to people on LinkedIn. Just never, you shouldn't reach out to people at the company that they're at today, right? You should reach out to the companies that they're at in the past. That is more of the good way to do back channeling. But you can't make those mistakes from Series A. So the people you bring on, I wouldn't say try and hire the best people in the world with the best accolades. Try to hire the best people that are in line with your culture and very obsessed with the mission, and will drive things forward and dedicate themselves.
Very cool. I've enjoyed this very much, Zeb. Thank you, and congrats on all that you guys are doing. It sounds like a lot of fun, and clearly your team's all in and having fun as well. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, everybody.